Every financial disaster in history had one thing in common. It wasn't greed. It wasn't bad luck. It was a mistake that seemed completely reasonable at the time. And here's the twist. The biggest financial collapse in modern history wasn't caused by criminals, reckless gamblers, or corrupt politicians acting in secret. It was caused by the most trusted, most educated, most respected institutions on the planet. Stay with me. We'll get back to that. Today we're running through the major mistakes that shaped and shattered the financial world. Not just to learn history, but because these exact same patterns, they're happening right now. In markets you're probably invested in. According to the IMF, the world has experienced over 150 banking crises since 1970. That's not a blip. That's a pattern. Tulip Mania, 1637. Let's start in 1637, Holland, and no. This isn't a gardening segment. Tulips had just arrived in Europe from the Ottoman Empire, and the Dutch went absolutely wild for them. Rare varieties were selling for more than a skilled craftsman made in a year. People mortgaged their homes to buy tulip bulbs. Think about that for a second. This is the equivalent of you taking out a second mortgage to buy a plant. But here's the catch. At the time, this made total sense to people. Tulips were new, they were exotic, the market was growing, and everyone around you was making money. So of course you'd want in. That's the first lesson of financial history. The mistakes always make sense in the moment. At peak tulip mania, a single Semper Augustus bulb sold for roughly 10,000 guilders, equivalent to a luxury Amsterdam canal house. The market collapsed in February 1637. Prices fell 99%. Fortunes disappeared overnight. And the economy? It kept moving. But the psychological scar lasted decades. Tulip mania gave us the blueprint for every bubble since. Hype, FOMO, collapse, blame, repeat. But if you think a tulip bubble sounds silly, wait until you hear what the smartest mathematicians in the world did next. Long-term capital management, 1998. Fast forward to 1998. Meet long-term capital management, LTCM for short. This hedge fund had 2 Nobel Prize winners on staff. 2. The founding team had PhDs from the world's best universities. Their models were supposed to be bulletproof, and for a while, they were printing money. Returns of 40% plus a year. Wall Street was in love, but here's the problem. Their models were built on one assumption, that markets behave rationally, that history rhymes, that risk can be mathematically contained. Then Russia defaulted on its debt in August 1998. Markets didn't behave rationally. They panicked, and LTCM, which had borrowed massively to amplify their bets, started hemorrhaging billions. At its peak, LTCM controlled over $125 billion in assets, with only $4.7 billion of actual equity. That's a leverage ratio of roughly 25 to 1. The Federal Reserve had to orchestrate a $3.6 billion private bailout to prevent a global market meltdown. The smartest people in the room had almost broken the entire financial system. Author Roger Lowenstein wrote the definitive account of this disaster. His book is literally called When Genius Failed, because that's exactly what happened. The lesson? Intelligence without humility is dangerous. Models don't account for panic, for irrationality. For the moments when human fear overrides logic, which brings us to the biggest disaster of them all. And remember that twist I teased at the start? We're getting close. The 2008 financial crisis. You've heard about 2008, but let me reframe it because most people get the story wrong. Here's a simple analogy. Imagine you're throwing a party and you've ordered a cake, except the bakery doesn't have enough ingredients, so they substitute half of them with sawdust and cover it in thick frosting so nobody can tell. They sell that cake for full price. You eat it. You feel fine. You sell slices to your friends. The party's great. Until someone gets sick. And then everyone gets sick. And then someone asks to see the recipe. That's what happened with mortgage-backed securities. Banks bundled thousands of home loans, including deeply risky ones, into complex financial products. Rating agencies like Moody's and Standard & Poor's stamped them AAA. the highest safety rating possible. Investors worldwide bought them thinking they were safe. By 2008, the U.S. housing market had inflated to roughly $12 trillion. When it collapsed, over $11 trillion in household wealth was wiped out in the U.S. alone. The rating agencies weren't acting in secret. They were using models that had never accounted for a nationwide housing collapse. Because historically, American home prices had never declined significantly on a national level. The mistake wasn't conspiracy, it was assumption. Sound familiar? That's exactly what LTCM did. That's exactly what Dutch tulip investors did. Same pattern. Different century. The 2008 crisis cost the global economy an estimated $22 trillion, according to a U.S. Government Accountability Office report. Which brings us to the twist I promised you at the very beginning. Remember I said the biggest financial collapse in modern history wasn't caused by criminals or reckless gamblers? The institutions that rated 2008's toxic mortgage products as AAA, the safest possible designation, were the same institutions trusted to protect the system. They weren't lying. They genuinely believed their models. The mistake that broke the global economy wasn't greed hiding in a dark room. It was trust, placed in tools that couldn't handle reality. That's the real lesson of every financial disaster in history. It's not that bad people do bad things. It's that good people, smart people, build systems they trust too much. And then stop asking the uncomfortable questions. The market doesn't reward the smartest. It punishes the most overconfident. The 2010 flash crash. Real quick, because we can't talk financial disasters without mentioning May 6th, 2010. In 36 minutes, the Dow Jones dropped nearly 1,000 points, wiping almost $1 trillion in market value. Then it rebounded. Same afternoon. The culprit? Algorithmic trading. Automated systems reacting to automated systems in a feedback loop that no human could stop fast enough. The SEC and CFTC investigation found a single large sell order triggered a cascade. Algorithms responded in milliseconds, amplifying the crash beyond any human-initiated event. The 2010 flash crash previewed what modern financial markets are most vulnerable to. Not human greed, but the speed of automated decisions at a scale our oversight can't match. The pattern continues, just faster. So here's what history is telling you. Every major financial disaster, Tulip Mania, LTCM, 2008, the flash crash, followed the same arc. Something new and exciting, collective confidence, complex systems built on assumptions, a trigger nobody expected, and then collapse. The institutions change, the instruments change, but the mistake stays the same. Assuming the past is a perfect map for the future. So what do you actually do with this? Ask the uncomfortable question. Whenever something sounds too consistent, too safe, too certain, ask what the model isn't accounting for. Ask what happens if the assumptions are wrong. That's the edge. Not knowing more than everyone else. Just being willing to ask what everyone else is too confident to wonder. The market doesn't reward the smartest. It punishes the most overconfident. If this reframed how you think about financial history, smash that like button. It genuinely helps the channel more than you'd think. Subscribe if you want more videos that go past the headlines and into the actual mechanics of how money and markets work. And drop a comment below. Which of these financial disasters do you think were most likely to repeat, and why? Tulip Mania vibes in crypto? Another LTCM hiding in an AI-powered hedge fund? Let's hear it. I read every single comment.